Welcome to another edition of Preps Plus Extra. I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This man right here is J.R. Radcliffe, sports editor of Now Newspapers. How you doing, J.R.?
I'm doing great. A little warmer this week, and as we're getting closer to March, I'm hoping it gets even warmer. I'm not holding my breath for a long-term warm-up, though.
Yes. As we sit here Tuesday afternoon, it's car washing weather. You might
I know.
Go get your car.
Comfortable.
Yeah. It's also, as we're winding down the end of the regular season, final week here of the regular season for boys basketball. A lot of teams have wrapped up conference titles, but there are a few that are still left out there that we're going to touch on here real quick. One, like we touched on last week, the never dull Woodland, especially on the west side. It's coming down pretty much to Milwaukee Pius and New Berlin Eisenhower, barring something crazy this week.
Yeah, it looks like those two teams are probably gonna tie it up for the West Division Championship, and I'm so interested heading into the playoffs where those teams are gonna end up, because every team I think in that conference has losses that make you raise your eyebrows, make you think, man, maybe they're not as good as we thought, and then they go out and win a game, and it's like, wow, they're really good again. So really cool to see Reed Timmer for New Berlin Eisenhower clear 2,000 points in his career. That just does not happen that often in Wisconsin basketball. So a testament to what he's been able to do consistently for 4 years at Eisenhower. He's clearly one of the best players in the state, headed into his really the home stretch of his senior season. And Pius, like at first I thought they kind of had fallen behind a little bit, but they got back into the race. Tulsa West and Pewaukee, a couple challengers, lost a couple surprising matchups along the way, and I still think those two teams are really good teams. I think that's a really good division, but I'm really curious how those D2 teams are going to stack up against other conferences. Now, we're going to see a lot of that, the cross-conference pollination here as we get into the postseason. Right,
and you mentioned Reed Timmer scoring his 2,000th point last week. Entering the season, there were only 21 players in state boys history that had ever reached that mark. So as you say, that's a pretty special accomplishment there.
Definitely.
And as I look at the Woodland West, Pius jumps out to me at this stage. I guess if you were to say who's playing the best right now of those teams, I would probably go with Pius. But this week they've got an interesting situation where they're going to play Greendale, which is, I believe, in third place right now in that conference.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
good.
But they play them twice, and that's a good team. You got to play twice, and even though, to me, you never know in that situation. Can Greendale trip Pius up one of those times? Greendale was very impressive a couple weeks ago when they beat New Berlin Eisenhower. So that's just going to be one of those things that, I think right now, in my opinion, Pius is playing the best of those teams in that division, but to me, they've also got the tougher role because they got 2 games against, a really good opponent.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then the City Conference we were talking about, too, is another one that's still somewhat tightly contested, although Milwaukee King looks like the heavy favorite to roll away with that one.
Yeah. Heading into Tuesday night, King was going to play host to Milwaukee Hamilton, which was both teams are undefeated in the conference, the final 2 teams that are undefeated in that league. And I would say King is would be the favorite, but Hamilton's one of those teams, they just kind of keep going and going. I guess if at the beginning of the year, if based off what I saw of that team in their first game, if you would have told me come the final week of February, they'd still be undefeated in the conference,
right.
With all due respect to Kevon Looney and his presence, I would have thought that someone would have gotten them at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one works out. And then, those teams still are going to have to close out. Whoever wins tonight is still going to have to close out and win a couple more games to wrap up the conference title. Another team that we were kind of talking about a little bit before we came on camera is Milwaukee Mesmer. Milwaukee Mesmer beat Brookfield Academy last week, snapped Brookfield Academy's 32-game conference win streak in the Midwest Classic. Here's what Jonathan Carson, Mesmer's senior forward, had to say about the victory.
We were really excited about the game. We was waiting for this all week, and then when it came, we were just ready. It was just a business trip the whole time. No talking, no laughing, none of that. We just came out to play. Yeah, I feel like we playing our best ball right now. We bounced back from a loss earlier this week. I just think this one is really going to get us over the hump and get us ready for the playoffs coming up.
Well, heading into the final week, Mesmer still has to beat Lake Country Lutheran on Friday to get a share of that Midwest Classic title. But you know, as it stands right now, they're in pretty good shape. Another team that's in pretty good shape, Kettle Moraine. They got to share the Classic 8 title.
Right. For the first time, the Classic 8's been around for 17 years, and this is the first time Kettle Moraine has gotten at least a share of the title. They beat Waukesha North pretty handily in last Friday's game on Valentine's Day, and that got them at least a share. But they have a tough, to win this outright, it's going to be a little difficult for them. They have to go to Mukwonago and face a team that beat them earlier in the season, Mukwonago. And Kettle Moraine only has the 2 losses, one to Arrowhead, one to Mukwonago. So they're going to have to avenge that loss and hold off Arrowhead, who's only 1 game behind them and playing extremely well down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of going out to talk to some of the guys at Kettle Moraine last week, and asked them about the those close losses they had, Arrowhead early, Mukwonago early, and I got the impression that those were games that I guess it's easy to say on the losing end that they maybe wish they had back. Games they didn't think they played as well in, and games really that were, I think looking back, I recall those guys saying that those were sort of confidence builder type games where they say, hey, maybe we didn't play our best ball, but hey, we're right here with Mukwonago. So it's going to be interesting to see, how there's a lot of motivation on both sides. Not only the revenge factor, but hey, if you haven't won a conference title in 7 years, you don't want to share it with anybody.
Right. One of those losses was a triple overtime to Arrowhead, so you could kind of call that a toss-up. I think what impresses me about them is coming into the year, we knew Paul Miller was very solid, returning all-conference performer, and they had an inside guy, Mitchell Olison, who's a senior as well. But we didn't know if they had other pieces who could contribute. And watching them Friday night, I've realized just they've got a pretty good amount of depth.
Yeah. And now let's shift over to the girls' side. And the girls obviously have. They have 2, at the start of this week, they had two full weeks really left of the regular season, but some of those conference races are going to go down to the wire. One of the bigger games this week, we got Milwaukee Pius going out to Pewaukee, trying to get a season sweep and really getting in great position to wrap up that Woodland West title. You were there the first time those teams played. Going into the second match, what are your thoughts?
Well, Pewaukee's going to have to play a lot better. They've only got the 1 loss all season long, but Pius absolutely dominated every facet, particularly the rebounding aspect of that game. I mean, Pius isn't a huge team, but they got to every ball. They got so many offensive rebounds in that game, and Pewaukee just couldn't combat the fact that Pius was getting 2 or 3 shots every possession. So Pewaukee, I'm sure they went back and tried to shore that up, and now that Pius is coming to them, they're going to have the advantage of the atmosphere. And I mean, this is a battle that could come to pass easily again in the tournament. So there's going to be some, obviously, the conference implications on the line, but also some thought process too when we see them again in the tournament. Are we gonna throw everything at them now? Or are we gonna hold back a little bit? I'm sure both teams are thinking about that.
Now we always talk about how unpredictable the Woodland is, and maybe the Greater Metro Conference girls race is kind of coming down that way too. 1 minute it looks like Divine Savior Holy Angels is in great position, and then all of a sudden, Brookfield Central gets them again. It's been a crazy. It almost seems like one of those leagues where when you hear coaches talk about it's a game of matchups, that seems like it's the case in the Greater Metro, where it just seems like some teams are just built to beat others.
Right. Well, Central's beaten DS twice. DS has beaten Hamilton twice. Hamilton's beaten Central twice. It's a triangle. The difference is DS doesn't have the extra losses. Hamilton lost to Brookfield East, and so did Central. Brookfield East now will try to get Divine Savior Holy Angels to close down the season in a couple weeks, and that's obviously going to say a lot about the conference title. That could be a 3-way championship otherwise, but if DSHA can take care of business, take down East for a second time, they're going to still have the conference title, and that'll be the first of Arike Ogunbowale's career.
Yeah, and then another league that probably maybe you would consider maybe top to bottom the best overall girls basketball league in the area, the Classic 8.
Definitely.
Arrowhead's had a fantastic year. They're in first place now, but you got a lot of you got Kettle Moraine that's still within striking distance there, and that's another league that's might come down to that final series of games.
A great job by the Lasers under a first-year coach, Mike Hamilton, who really found a way to coordinate for the seniors on that team. 3 really good seniors, Lindley Ochtenhagen, Emma Melitik, and Chloe Tompkins, who've been through 3 coaches in 3 years, but they're really in sync right now. They did have a really close loss to Waukesha West. That's keeping them a game back in the standings to Arrowhead, but and Arrowhead's a really good team. Rick Whitty, the team that he coaches, was a first-year coach last year when they took them to the state tournament, and they came in with high expectations. Their only loss in the league was a close call to Mukwonago. They lost to Milwaukee King. They had beat Kimberly, the top-ranked team in the state, last year to get to state. So they're very talented. I don't know if Kettle Moraine can beat them. That's going to be a matchup at the end of the year that could determine whether KM can get a share with Arrowhead. But I mean, Kettle Moraine's had a great run. So again, in both leagues, Arrowhead and Kettle Moraine are competing for the top 2 spots. And in the boys, KM's got the lead, and the girls, it's Arrowhead. So we'll see if that changes in the next week or so.
Yeah, and before we wrap up here, we'll just kind of touch on real quick one other race that will probably come down, not necessarily to the wire, but this week in the Wisconsin Little 10, you got Beaver Dam coming down to Wisconsin Lutheran. Both those teams are have one loss in the league, or tied for first place. And again, the winner, whoever wins that game, is going to be in great position next week to wrap up the Wisconsin Little 10 title. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Preps Plus Extra. For more Preps Plus action, be sure to watch me and Lance Allen every Sunday on TMJ4. Take care.